going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review, and this is our show where we review the Magic stories. And today we are back with the second to last in our continuation, and God knows our finale of, or leading up to our finale, I should say, of our reviews of the Battle for Zendikar / Oath of the Gatewatch stories. We started this way long ago after the Zendikar Rising stories, and so now we are back once again. And this week, or this time, we are here with Zendikar's Last Stand by Doug Beyer. My quick review at the top of this one is, this one I think is a must-read. It is the ending of the conflict with 2 out of 3 of the Eldrazi Titans. So if you want to know how that ends one way or the other, this is the story that you need to read. And it's not just out of obligation, I enjoyed it as well. So it's worth your time.
I definitely enjoyed this one, but, you know, I'm partial because I really love Nissa and I'm basically Chandra, so.
Wow, yeah, and they are red and green and Amy is Gruul, so yeah, sure, that's fair.
That's
all right.
Kind of why I am.
So
But
if
also vice versa.
So if that is compelling to any of you, and you have not gotten a chance to read this story, or because it's been a while since the story came out, if you want a refresher, but you're not really willing to go looking for it, I don't blame you. The top link in the description down below will take you right to the story for yourself, so you don't have to worry about seeking it out, maybe not finding it, etc. We try our best to remove as many barriers as possible so that folks can find these things, read them, and enjoy. And then if you do leave to go read that story, of course, we would love it if when you are done, you would come back here and join us to give us your opinions and make sure, compare and contrast them with ours.
Mm-hmm. Or let us know anything we left out, because we do forget things.
God knows. There's only so much I write down or can write down or can hone in on and focus in on, and sometimes other people have very different perspectives than we do, and that's why we love presenting it to other folks,
yes,
so that we can get that varied perspective and learn.
Yeah.
Before we go into the full review itself, just a quick hi. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. If you can see the fly, I apologize. We turn the lights on and it gets really excited. I'll let it out later. It's our pet fly, and I'll thank you not to talk about it. It's not. We don't have a pet fly. That would be ridiculous. But with all that being said, if you're enjoying the things that we're doing on this channel...
A pet with a very short lifespan.
Yeah.
Can I keep him?
You sure can.
Because in a couple days, it'll be dead.
So, yeah, thank you so much for being here. If you're enjoying the things that we're doing here on this channel, please don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell so that you will get notifications whenever any of our videos come out, including more JaARs in the future. Obviously, if you're watching this in real time when it comes out, then you know that the next set of stories that we're going to be reviewing after next week's finale of Battle for Zendikar Oath of the Gatewatch is going to be Dominaria United. And we will be here for those as quickly as we can get them up within reason. We will be doing that while still giving the stories the time that they deserve to be given. That's just how we're doing things these days. Wizards can absolutely choose to put out 10 stories in 8 days, but that doesn't mean we're putting out 10 JaARs in 8 days or in 8 weeks or whatever the case may be. We're going to do our best, like I said, to give the stories the time that they deserve while still putting out all the other things that we put out on this channel. On our other 2 channels, Video Games for All and Gluten Free for All, those channels linked down in the description box below, and obviously, when you're there, we would love it if you would sub and ring the bells there as well. And then last but not least, please don't forget that if you are a fan of Magic the Gathering, right here on this channel, every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, we play MTG Arena. Mostly, it is limited, whatever limited format happens to be around at the time, draft, sealed, whatever the case may be. And that is at, like I said, at 8 p.m. Eastern, and then on Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern, we also are live streaming. But Fridays we play whatever video game we happen to be playing at the time. Recently, we have been playing through our first ever Nuzlocke of Pokemon Fire Red. Yeah. Last week, again, if you're watching this in real time, last Friday, we had an incredible episode. and especially an incredible ending to the episode. So if you missed it, first of all, the VOD is over on Video Games for All. So like I said, check the link in the description down below, and you can go watch that for yourself. But also, then we would love it if you would join us live if that's something that sounds interesting to you. If you don't know what a Nuzlocke is of Pokemon Fire Red, come join us.
Check it out.
Feel free to ask. We would be happy to explain. Even Amy has kind of become an expert at this point. Having not known much about it at the start, you know more than you think. You'd be surprised.
And it's certainly not what I would call an expert.
Fair enough. I mean in terms of like the rules or like what is expected and what's allowed and what's not allowed in a Nuzlocke. That kind of thing. So that if somebody were to come and ask in chat, that you would be able to explain it to them, that's all.
Or at least be able to say, like, we're not doing this in this one or whatever.
Correct. Yes.
Some of it.
Right. So if that sounds, like I said, if that sounds interesting to you, you will get the updates if you ring the bell for the streams as well. I was I was like, I don't know if she's going to do it. I'm not going to point at her for it, but thank you. So yeah, thank you for bearing with us. And then last but not, I said last but not least already. Also, please don't forget, likes and shares go a very long way, and we really appreciate it. So, on to the full review itself. This was a big one. This is a big story. This is the end of Two of the Titans. And it's a culmination of all the fighting, all the, like, people getting together, whether it be, you know, just as a group of friends or convenience or whatever the case may be. This story, interestingly, basically the climactic fight finish focuses on Chandra and Kiora separately. Although I did like how at the end it came together. The two came together because they're in the same vicinity and they can see one another on occasion, but they're never like talking with one another, except at the end when Kiora actually finds Chandra and flips her over, but that's like the first time that the two of them are in that kind of close proximity to one another. And so it really is like, you know, they're kind of at opposite ends of the battlefield and are able to like kind of come together. But it reminded me of like the way that this story is told from Chandra and Kiora's perspective. I mean, arguably Chandra is a big part of this story because of what she ultimately ends up doing in the fight. But Kiora? I mean, she was a big part of all the stories before now, right? And especially with her relationship with Kozilek and Zendikar in general. But she didn't really have a huge part to play in this, except for her, like...
Except for trying to screw it up.
Yes. Which she thought she was doing for a noble reason. She just was misguided in that. But yeah, and I guess it's Chandra and Kiora were represented the two entities, the two individuals that were like going against Jace, basically, in Jace's like decision making or being the leader in that particular section. But I still thought it was good. I mean, a lot of times recently in like modern day stories, we've been complaining about like people saying like, oh, well, so-and-so's over there and I know they're thinking this because XYZ, which is a really lazy way of storytelling because you're not giving us their perspective, but you're just like, well, I know that that's what they're thinking because I'm the author and I need you to know that that's what they're thinking.
Right.
But I'm going to have another character just be able to read their mind without telepathy, right? Just because I need you to know that that's what's happening. And it's like, that's not, it's so forced, right? It just feels so forced and bad when that happens. And this story didn't do that, but still allowed you to see. I mean, you talked about the fact that you liked this story because of how important Nissa was to the story, and we didn't get her perspective once in the entire story.
Yeah, but we didn't need to.
Right. But what I'm saying is that's just good storytelling. That you're able to have the perspective of two other characters, but still get to understand what's going on in the mind of a third character that you know really well. Mm-hmm. And so I really appreciated that bit of writing. I thought it was very good and shows what could be done in those situations because we haven't really been getting that as much of late, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So it's just something that I noticed. I wanted to point it out because it's very good. It was very well done.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I kind of didn't remember this from back in the day when we originally read it.
Yep.
And, like, I didn't realize quite how pivotal Nissa was to all of this. Because, basically, like, she was holding the Titans in the whole time. And then also coming over and putting all of her power and all of the plane's power into Chandra to allow Chandra then to blast the Titans while she's still holding them in place.
Sort of, yeah. Because, I mean, at that point, the ley lines were, but they were being channeled through her. And then what the story kind of indicated was once Nissa touched Chandra's shoulder, then the ley lines were being channeled through Chandra instead. But basically then Chandra was just able to, like, light the ley lines on fire, and because the ley lines were weaved and wrapped around the Eldrazi Titans, that is how then, spoilers I guess, that is how then she was able to burn them away into clouds of like ghost
Dust.
clouds of themselves, yeah. Basically. Ironic for Roma.
Crazy.
Yeah. Well, and I literally wrote this down. It's funny that you mentioned not remembering how pivotal Nissa was. Twice, in like, you know, within 2 sentences of one another, twice in this story, Nissa is mentioned once doubtingly and once definitively as being, quote, the key to everything.
Right.
So I think that's funny that you're like, oh, I forgot. Well, they reminded you, all right, that Kiora was like, you know, there's the elf thinking that she's the key to everything, and then it cuts to Chandra, and Chandra's like, Nissa's the key to everything.
Well, and she was.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Chandra would not have been able to burn them without Nissa and the plane's power behind that.
Correct.
And Nissa would not have been able to hold them without the plane's power and her own.
Correct.
And without those two things, all of this would have been for naught.
Yep.
Right? I mean, they would not have been able to defeat the Titans.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, she was the key to everything.
Yeah.
And I think Kiora started to kind of realize after the whole I'm trying to put an end to this bullshit, that, okay, like, just because she channeled all of her own and the plane's power into holding the Titans and then flaming the Titans to death doesn't mean that Zendikar just poofs into nothing and we all die.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's what Kiora thought.
Well, because don't forget, Chandra wasn't part of the plan originally. So Jace is sitting there yelling, let the plan work, let the plan work. And Kiora thought, arguably rightfully so, that the plan wasn't going to work.
Right.
Because ultimately, it didn't really work.
Right.
The point was that what they originally wanted to do was use the ley lines to trap the Eldrazi, draw them in, and then suck them dry, essentially. Like drain them of their form and their function and their ability, and that Zendikar would basically eat them. And the line that the story used was that it was basically Zendikar versus the Eldrazi attempting to consume one another, but the Eldrazi were made to consume, or designed to consume. And so that plan in and of itself was going to fail, because Zendikar could not consume the entirety of what the Eldrazi were. And so Kiora was like, stop, you need to let them go. And Chandra was like, stop, you need to let me burn them. Like, stop, like, in other words, stop doing your plan, but two different ideas. Kiora's idea was just give up, we'll fight again some other day, some other place. And Jace's point was millions of people will die. You're putting everyone at risk. Chandra was like, I'm just going to burn them. But to be fair, any problem that Chandra has ever come across, her answer is, I'm going to burn them. So
yes, but, I mean, think about what you just said. You said the plane needed to consume the Eldrazi, and it wasn't capable of doing that.
Yeah.
Well, what is? flames.
Mhm.
Flames consume things.
Yes. But Chandra didn't know when she said, let me burn them, that she couldn't, without extra assistance, burn them. Because when she tried, it failed.
Right.
And it was not until Nissa walked over and put her hand on her shoulder that Chandra was able to tap into the plane of the mana, I'll flip those words around. The mana of the plane itself, I got it, that she was then able to produce enough fire or sufficient fire to burn up these two titans that, by the way, the descriptions of those two titans becoming the world, becoming the sky, and the plane itself were incredibly well done. Incredible. Like, the way, the wording that was used, like the vocabulary that was used for it, the descriptive language was just incredible. So.
I just feel like you kind of...
I know, I jumped. Sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So yeah, I mean, when Nissa agreed, because Nissa was the one who did, to let Chandra burn them, I was like, why does Nissa know that? So I think Nissa the whole time had the plan to essentially put the plane in the flames so that the flames could consume the Eldrazi. So that could come back around. So like what you said before, it was the Eldrazi consumed the plane or the plane consumed the Eldrazi.
Right.
The plane couldn't consume the Eldrazi because the element of earth is not to consume unless it's like an earthquake that creates a gigantic like fissure that everybody falls in and then it like closes up somehow, like a sinkhole or something.
Sure. But that's still not technically consumption. It's just falling and then maybe crushing if they're crushed or whatever. But obviously I see what you mean.
Well, it would like ultimately like make it die enough so that then its energy and like pieces would become the earth, you know, at some point.
Absolutely.
You know, but that would obviously take a lot longer than just like channeling the energy of the earth into the fire that then consumed them.
Right. Did you notice at one point, it happened for a little bit here, but Kiora was very much keyed into what seemed to be, at least in my head, the Bowl Island.
Oh,
like the art of the Bowl Island pouring the waterfall down. Kiora obviously didn't call it that because Kiora doesn't have a concept of the island artwork, but we know it, right? And you all probably know it. It's one of the, I would argue, one of the more famous island arts. But I know it's beloved by many. But it mentions it multiple times in this story that it's there and Kiora can see it. And Kiora's like, well, look, as long as these things are floating, right, the plane is fine. Like, I can still be okay with being able to protect the elf while she does her thing. And then the true moment, right, of problem is when the Bowl Island finally falls out of the sky and crashes and all the water falls, falls everywhere. Flies everywhere and etc. And like that's the moment where it's like, oh god, we're screwed. The Bowl Island fell out of the sky. No other thing in the whole
just a bowl
on the ground. But yeah, I thought that was cool that like, for those who know, and if you don't, it's just a cool description nonetheless. But like if you're like, oh my god, it's the Bowl Island, it just falls out of the sky. I don't know. I myself thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
Kiora attempting to stop Nissa and Jace. We've talked about it multiple times now. And Kiora's like, okay, let's stop now. And Jace is like, no, let the plan work. And finally Kiora's like, all right, Bellerin. She's like, if you're not going to stop it, I will. And uses the Bident and draws in the entire Halimar Sea into the air. in a ball and then throws it at Nissa. Like,
Yeah,
what?
it's just, like, I pictured just this big, like, writhing, like, still moving, you know, waves of the ocean, but kind of focused into this tight ball that she just, like, is holding there, basically.
Well, it sounded like it was massive, right? So...
I mean, it's a whole sea.
Yes. So for folks who have watched our stuff over on Video Games for All or when we were live streaming it here, it reminded me of a spirit bomb from Dragon Ball Z. It really did. Like, it was just, you know, go like this, and it starts as a tiny little bead, and then it grows and grows and grows and grows, and then finally you're just like, you know, you just throw it at somebody. And Jace, of all people. Now, you had a question, and I had a theory, but I have no way of proving it. I just have a feeling. When the sea was thrown at Nissa, the ball split in half. And then those two halves split in half. And then those quarters split in half, and split in half, and split in half.
Right.
And the story described it as becoming mist, which I was like, the whole sea is gone? I was like, that's probably an issue.
Right.
That's probably not great. But then it implied that water was hitting the Eldrazi spawn and like washing them away. So it sounds like maybe just at Nissa was missed because it was where the cut was, but that all that water still hit somewhere so that it still exists.
Yeah.
As opposed to like being evaporated essentially and like the whole sea is gone now.
Yeah, I mean, like, mist is still water that exists just in the air. It's just super dispersed, you know?
Right.
But again, that's another thing where in order to make it come back to being a sea would be so time consuming.
Yes.
You know?
But it's funny because you said you were like because what the story described was Jace stepped in between Kiora and Nissa, and that is what made the sea split in multiple ways.
Okay.
Now, again, like I said, you rightfully so were like, what just happened?
Yeah, I'm like, what kind of blue spell splits things and splits things and splits things and splits things and splits things until they turn into mist?
Right. And so my theory...
I was like, did he just like counterspell it? And that's like the cool way that they described it?
Right. My theory, and if other people have other thoughts, I truly would love to hear them, as with literally anything, but
yeah,
you know,
of course.
Sometimes I ask for specific things. But my theory was that he controlled Kiora and made her use the Bident to do all of that.
Right.
Because...
Which I didn't think of. But that makes sense too.
Yeah, I think so. Because otherwise, like, I'm with you. What blue spell is there that does that? But yeah, that's my thought process. That was what I had in my head of like, okay, this is what he did. He stepped up, controlled her mind, and made her split it and split it and split it and split it, and then throw it at the Eldrazi spawn to clear them out of the way, because arguably that was Kiora's job the whole time.
That's what he fucking asked her to do. And instead she's like, no, I'm going to stop you from doing what you're doing, even though we agreed to it. No.
Yeah.
Just no.
Yeah. So,
Like I understand her reasoning for doing so, but you can't. You're in a group of people who came to the conclusion that this was the plan that y'all were going to do.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden you're saying, oh, well, it doesn't look to me in this moment like it's going to work. So now I'm going to throw a monkey wrench in it. That's not how that works.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you need to learn teamwork.
Exactly.
Sharing is caring.
She never went to, you know, she worships a trickster god. It's like her thing, right? Which, they even said that here.
I mean, she doesn't anymore.
Right, because there was literally a point in this story where Kiora notices Kozilek and says something to the effect of being aware that he's not a trickster god, he's just a trick. From the blind eternities, come here to Zendikar, he's just a trick, not a trickster.
Right.
So, I thought that was cool.
I thought it was cute.
Two last things. One, I just want to point this out because it's something that I thought of. Technically,
oh boy.
if an author wanted to do it, you could read this story and still say that those two titans are alive.
Right.
You absolutely could do that.
Mm-hmm.
You could just have them, because Chandra was attached to the ley lines and burned the ley lines and lit the Titans on fire, no one saw them die.
Right.
Now, that's my philosophy as a comic book reader for many, many years. If you don't see the body, they're not dead. And even if you do see the body, that doesn't necessarily mean they're dead. I've been burned by Skrulls too many times as a Marvel fan. The point I was trying to make was a new author, because we've talked a lot about the new authors in the modern day and the new story team and etc. They could absolutely read this story as Chandra takes over the ley lines, lights them on fire, the Eldrazi Titans get burned, but now because Chandra is in control of the ley lines, not Nissa, they're not held there anymore, and they retreat into the Blind Eternities, and they're burned and they're hurt, but they're not dead. Yeah. And so they're like dormant for however long it takes for them to reappear again, and then they could come back. I could conceivably see it. I would hate it, because this is a very good end to those two, and Emrakul is still alive, so you still have the concept of the Eldrazi in existence, and so you can still have all the spawn and Emrakul as a big titan and stuff. You can still do all those stories that you want. You don't need Kozilek and Emrakul. But Magic is a game that wants to print...
You need Emrakul. You don't need Kozilek. Ulamog.
What did I say? Did I mention Emrakul again in the...
Yeah.
God damn it. Yes, Kozilek and Ulamog. Sorry, thank you.
I need Emrakul.
Magic is a game that wants to make money. And so they can do reprints in Masters sets, etc., despite the fact that the characters are dead, because that's just how reprint sets work. But if they want new versions of those cards to drum up interest, they very well could bring them back, if that is something that they wanted to do. And then, finally, this is the story. Once it started being a little bit more obvious later on, this is the story that I looked back to in Kaladesh, when Chandra and Nissa started really forming their, like, possibly romantic relationship, or should have been romantic relationship, and was. When that started on Kaladesh, more obviously, this is the story that I looked back to say, this is where they formed that connection.
Yeah.
Literally the connection of the hand on the shoulder and the joining of the ley lines and the mana and etc. Like, I would imagine that Planeswalkers couldn't really be closer,
right.
You know, in that way, in merging their magics like that. Mm-hmm. So,
sure.
This is the story that I look back to for the origin of those two being so close with one another. And of course, if we didn't have what we did in terms of story and etc., we could still have that relationship, but instead it's Adeline, apparently, now. And Nissa's just doing her own thing. But that's neither here nor there. This is where I think their relationship really started and really got off the ground. That's me personally. If you have other thoughts of where it might have began, truly, either you disagree and you think it was later, or you disagree and you think it was sooner, or you agree. As always, with anything, let us know in the comments down below.
Yeah, I mean, I originally thought that it was when Nissa was teaching Chandra how to meditate and stuff, but that's because I forgot about this.
Fair. Yeah, and that's why I said, because I believe that was, oh no, maybe that was Amonkhet, where she taught her how to meditate. It was either that or Kaladesh, I don't remember, but yeah. It was obviously later than this. Clearly. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, so this is the one that I really look back to, where I'm like, oh, cool, there it is.
Right.
So, okay. Anything else for this one?
I don't think so.
It was a good one, I think.
It was great.
And like I said, it's really the way to find out how these Titans died, right? Because, again, for all the reprint sets and etc. from when they were originally there, Ulamog, Kozilek, big name characters, literally and figuratively
right.
big. And if people don't know how they died, this is the story for how they died.
Right.
So you should read it.
They died. If
Maybe.
you believe that they did in fact die.
Right. I would, like I said, I would love for them to stay dead.
Yeah.
Right. I truly would. Like, if
Me
Emrakul
too,
wants to try
they
to...
crave Emrakul's style. I mean, she's too good for them.
That's why she left and went to a different plane. She was like, you two stay here. You're going to screw this up. I got to go.
Well, that's why she had 2 of them. And then she was just like, ugh. You know?
If you haven't been here for other episodes, Amy loves Emrakul.
I do.
So
she's the best.
hey, if you are the type of person that can read a story and fall in love with a flying spaghetti jellyfish monster creature thing, let us know in the comments down below, because honestly, making friends with, I guess, or finding love for a character that is nothing that you would ever see in your life. Like, you could look at Chandra and be like, oh, I've met that person before. But you're not really going to look at Emrakul and be like, I've met that person before. You haven't. But you can still look at Emrakul and be like, that's a really cool character.
Yeah.
Right? The entity that is Emrakul is really interesting to me, and I enjoy reading her, like, stories about her and hearing from her in those stories. And I think that's a really great way. I walked around it a little bit, but I think it's a really great way for you to join us as we show off our
#Vorthos Pride.
That's right.
But yeah, I mean, this story is another great example of the things that prompted Emrakul to say what she said to Nissa
100%.
when she knew that Nissa was so innately powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, because you line her up against Jace and Gideon and Chandra and Kiora in this story,
Yeah.
in any of these, and you're like, Nissa's power level is like way fucking up here, and the rest of them are like way down here.
Yeah. I will say, Gideon had very little to do in this story.
Right.
Very little. He commanded troops from afar, which Chandra kind of saw, and then out of the corner of her eye while she was busy doing other things, to be fair, very impressive, Gideon stopped a falling landmass.
Yeah, it was like a comet.
With himself.
With
he
his
just
body.
stood there and was like, no. And it bounced off of him and went somewhere else.
You know what it made me think of? It made me think of when Thor decided to like go in the star or whatever.
Yes, and the sun was hitting him.
If I can die, and he's like, yes, that would be what dying
That's
is.
what killing you means. Yeah. Yeah.
Or whatever. And
Yeah.
I was like, yes.
Yeah.
Gideon's
He's like,
just like trying to find out if he'll die at this point. He's just like trying to put it to the test.
Yeah.
He's like, will this kill me?
Well, 'cause, like-
no. Will this kill me?
because like he's invulnerable when he does that, but I didn't think he had like super strength when he did that. So like, if it hits him, like theoretically with how physics works, I'm not a scientist,
Right.
but with how physics works, I imagine that.
Just go flying.
Well, no, not even that. I mean, if his invulnerability allows him to stay in that spot and not move, all it would mean is that the earth would hit him, or the stone would hit him, and then it would stop at him, but the other pieces would just go over and around him.
Yeah.
And get to Chandra behind him. Like, he wasn't like up on Chandra in that moment.
Yeah,
He was
it's
just
not
kind of
like
near
he's
her.
as big as the landmass.
So-
Just randomly, he's just like.
Yeah.
And it's not like he's creating a force field, really.
Well, he does. He creates it around his body.
Yeah, but can he expand it
No.
to be whatever size
Not-
he wants it to be?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Yeah, I didn't
It is.
think
It is
so.
solely around his own skin and form, and he can do it localized. Like, oh, someone's going to stab me here, I'll put it right here.
Okay.
Or he can do it over his entire body. It's just that doing it over his entire body, he can't do for very long because it would exhaust him too
Yeah.
quickly. But to stop an entire landmass, it would
He
make
was
sense.
able to, like, give it to Liliana or whatever.
But then he died.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Yeah,
sure.
because he would have died if he wasn't invulnerable.
Correct.
Not just because, oh, like, me giving you this makes me die.
Correct. It's because he basically absorbed her right or her contract, and then gave her his invulnerability so that she wouldn't be affected by
Right.
it. Yeah. Yep.
Well, anyway.
Yes. Thank you all so very much for watching this particular episode of JaAR. We will be back hopefully in a few days. So stay tuned. Like I said, if you have that bell rung, you'll get notifications as soon as that video comes out. So I encourage you to do that. Because like I said, we'll be back in a couple of days with the actual final story for Battle for Zendikar / at this point, Oath of the Gatewatch.
Yeah.
And yeah, then we will be able to move on to Dominaria United, so keep that notification bell rung because we're going to be moving right along to that one as well. And then of course we would love it, as we said, join us Mondays and Fridays 8 p.m. Eastern for our streams. If you're Magic fans, that's what Monday is. Fridays, Pokemon, or whatever video game we happen to be playing, depending on when you're watching this. But 8 p.m. Eastern time, Mondays and Fridays, we would love to have you.
Yes.
So, for now, from us here at the Geek for All family of channels, I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.